Have you ever looked at your child and wondered, how can I best support the beautiful, unique way their mind works? I recently had the privilege of speaking with Simon Arnold, the host of AuDHD Me and Mo, the podcast. Simon has a unique journey to his own diagnosis, and he's agreed to share it with us today. This is a special interview session in that after we finished recording Simon's interview, he turned around and interviewed me about my experience raising two children with disabilities, and I was able to teach him a little bit about narcolepsy along the way. I'll post the link to Simon's podcast episode so you can hear the second half of our session over on AuDHD Me and Mo, the podcast, after you listen to today's episode here. Welcome to Water Prairie, a podcast for parents of children with disabilities. I'm your host, Tonya Wallum, and I'm glad you're here. In this interview, Simon is generously sharing his own powerful journey of being diagnosed with both autism and ADHD as an adult. His experiences offer a unique and valuable lens on how neurodiversity can manifest and the profound impact of understanding our own and our children's unique wiring. Get ready for a conversation filled with honesty, vulnerability, and insights that I know will resonate deeply with you. Simon, welcome to Water Prairie.
Thank you, Tonya. It's great to be here. Thank you.
So listeners, Simon and I have been talking for a bit trying to get this coordinated. As I said earlier, we're going to be sharing this on both of our podcasts. And if you want to hear the full conversation between us, you need to go to Simon's and listen to that. So check the show notes. I have a link there directly to the other part of this interview, so you're not missing any of it. But for this part of the interview, I wanted to talk to Simon about his journey with both autism and ADHD. So a lot of our parents listening in our audience are navigating the journey of trying to understand their child's unique neurodevelopment. Maybe that's the word I want to use. Whether it's ADHD or autism or both. And I'm finding more and more have both as the diagnosis. Could you tell me, how did you get started with even questioning whether there might be something going on for you?
Well, I'd always known that something was wrong or something was different from the age of 8. And it took me, there were just indications throughout the decades, really. And then, my son was diagnosed my oldest son in 2015 with ADHD. I listened to an MP3 from Dr. Russell Barkley, actually, who's really famous, on adult ADHD for 5 years. And realized that, and I wrote it in my book, of course, The 13-Hour Life Coach, which I wrote, that I couldn't, with my own brain, make the decision that I've got ADHD using my own brain to come to that decision, if that makes sense. So I needed an outside source to give me a bit of a thrust towards ADHD. And it was only when I failed medical school that my wife at the time gave me a list of 20 questions, actually from the Charity, which is a hospital in Berlin, with 20 questions on what ADHD actually looks like. I took it away for an hour, thought I had 17. She said, you have all of them. And then she helped me write emails to the Charity Hospital Clinic, and others, really. And then I got accepted, and it went from there, really.
Wow. So what were some of those signs? I know 20 is a lot to remember, but were there any major ones that stand out for you?
All of them. It mostly like scattered CV. It's like, oh, wow, yes, like 20 different jobs in 20 years. Not having the ability to remember anything. They were all relevant, and even that I couldn't see it with clarity. I needed her to give me that form, and then we went further with that. So a lot of us really need an outside source, and I do suggest it these days that, say we're friends and we see each other regularly, and you just indicate, hey, you might have ADHD. I write it down in my daily journal, and then I'll reflect on that and see Tonya's said within 10 times within 2 months that I might have ADHD. I should follow that up. So that's a good way of coming at it from a different angle.
For you, because it seems like this kind of came out of the blue for you because you weren't seeing it in yourself. what was your initial reaction to the diagnosis?
It's the best thing in my whole life. uh, in the first chapter of my book, I naturally was asked to take some medication to try out with ADHD. And this is what I really want to say. There's a lot of diagnoses these days as well. There is, I think you can go to 5 to 8 milligrams of a certain medication and get the benefits of it as a normal functioning human being, neurotypical person. But you'll find that, if people took what I take, they'd actually have the ADHD symptoms because there's far too much dopamine firing in the brain. So I basically really, to be honest, came online for the very first time with clarity. And that's when Mo came along. Mo is the inner voice. And if you don't mind, I just wanted to explain it a little bit from my recent research. We, as kids, we're from like 2 years old in the theta level of like brain vibration frequency. And I believe that us with ADHD don't actually leave the theta level at about the age of 11 and go into the beta, and the alpha states. We stay there. And in a way, I was brought out of this theta level in kind of given the option to see the different frequencies of brain function. And Mo came along and he said immediately, "Hi, it's Mo." And it was so loud in my head that I actually went to the window and opened the window to see if someone was physically there. And this is why, my podcast is called the Me and Mo podcast. It's the inner voice that I've always wanted, that neurotypicals have. And I do talk about why can't they just appreciate the fact that they have an inner voice, and not be the ones that jump over the fence when we just jump over it without thinking about it, right? When we're younger. So it's of great significance, my diagnosis to me.
So you would say that there's more validation and clarity because of the diagnosis then?
I mean, lots of things. I read a book for the first time, Tonya.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I read.
How, wait, how did you get to med school without reading a book?
Just because I'd done so in physiotherapy. I was in private practice with a friend of mine who owned a physiotherapy practice, and I'd stay in there and learn all the techniques. The thing was, with the 4 executive functions, predominantly the memory recall, my memory was like a sieve. So I went into, and they knew that I'd studied in 2 other countries already, and had been in the area for a lot of years of my life. The assessors were I walked in and anyone off the street could have done better than I did with no prior knowledge. It's just really, really freaking embarrassing. Like, it's not just cover your hands in front of your face. It's kind of like, I want to disappear from everywhere. It's that bad. But now, honestly, I could pass it with flying colors because I do have some ability, a lot of ability of memory recall. I can remember everything now.
So this is because of the effects of the medication that you're taking?
Yeah, the medication's really interesting. We have the hormone neurophyrin in our bodies, of course, and within the medication, it isn't just the balance between the dopamine and the serotonin, what everyone thinks, really, because the dopamine kind of, if you could imagine it coming down the face in a way, the dopamine goes at the right speed and where it should go and lands at where it should go, and that's great. But the neurophyrin actually opens up the arteries within the brain and gives your brain more blood to the area. Therefore, you have a better memory recall system up there.
Right. Okay. It makes perfect sense. I had a guest on last year who is looking at the receptors and how diet changes can help open and close the genes that affect those receptors. I thought it was really interesting. And she wasn't saying take medicine or not take medicine, but there's ways to help control some of the genetic sides of things, with the just the way you're regulating diet and toxins that may or may not be part of your system. I found it really an interesting topic.
I did a recent podcast about it's coming up actually, called cyclones and hurricanes. And once or twice every 6 weeks, every 6 months, I'm in a hurricane that I can't get out of. And this is the reason. This is the reason why I think, particularly a lot of women in Canada, because that's the highest rate, are just unaliving themselves, because we've got, when we have too much medication, and I'm not pro or contra medication. If people want to not use medication, that's also great as well. But when too much medication is released into the system, then it's kind of like an explosion goes on. But I spoke to Dr. Ludovico on my podcast, and he said, stay away from drinking, citrus-based drinks when you're taking your medication, because we could use orange juice, couldn't we, to drink it down in the morning, without thinking. But he indicates that perhaps it just opens up, the stomach a little bit more to the the small balls within the medication just get dissolved so much quicker, and then it gets us into trouble. So that's where I wanted to come in with that. Take it with water, and you'll be better off than oranges.
He was saying any type of citrus, because a lot of times I'll read like grapefruit is one to stay away from for certain medications. So it isn't one; it's so the acidity of it that's doing it.
That's what's doing it, apparently.
All right, parents, always do your own research, but you now have something else to dig into here. We're going to have your podcast linked in the show notes, so parents look through his directory to find that interview, and then you can get the direct information from him.
If you do have inevitably the times when too much medication is released in your system, you're not sure what to do, because everything kind of goes haywire up there. It's only for a day, once every 6 months or so, but it's still bad. Be around people, that maybe they can look out for you. I go into town, I walk through the town, I'm like, okay, this is a bad day, but there's people around. Not just for, kind of safety issues a little bit, but also knowing that you're not by yourself. So that's really the suggestion I put in there.
I was going to ask you about how the diagnosis may have shifted your understanding, but it sounds like it really has, and you've dug in deep with this to understand it more. Have you always been one who has wanted to dig deeper into things, or is this new for you?
I've always wanted to dig deeper into things. From 2009, I was studying the works of Bob Proctor and, all those motivational speakers. And I tell you what, when you have memory recall and you need the medication, that's obvious. I actually have an eidetic memory. I can recall everything. So that's why I don't really go into many social situations, because I don't want to remember everything that's going on. And I'm on my meds for 13 hours. So that's why my book is called The 13-Hour Life Coach.
Okay. Now, is the book out? Is it one that people can buy?
It's been out since November 22 on lulu.com.
Okay.
And I've just launched the audio version. I did an audio version. It took 4 days and I lost my voice almost. But that's also available on my podcast.
So again, listeners, anything that you're hearing of references, check the show notes, because we'll put the links of all of the pieces that we have talked about and we will talk about. I'm sure there'll be others.
Yeah.
So thinking back to our listeners, again, Water Prairie listeners are primarily parents of children with disabilities. And listeners, whether your child has the same diagnosis, you may still glean some information that'll help you ask some questions about your own situation. But some of them are trying to find out how they can support their children. So any advice for our parents on how they can encourage their child who may have an autism or ADHD diagnosis?
Yeah, and this is going to be lovely what I'm going to bring out now, to be honest. I mean, with ADHD, a lot of the kids are prescribed medication. We had, let's start with a good area, really. So, my son was quiet, and now having ADHD and taking meds myself, the quietness is number one as a parent. Don't, their personality and character doesn't change, but don't expect them to be the person that you want them to be, if that makes sense. If they're quiet, it could be that their inner voice is initiated and is with them, and it's their companion, because Mo is my companion all the time. I love him to death. It's like, that's the real love in life, basically, is to love yourself. I know it sounds a bit weird, but I know other people. So Sarah, a friend of mine, her inner voice is Jane, and Jane and Mo link up. Our inner voices link up before we do verbally. We don't have to be near each other. We could be across waters like we are now. And if your children are quiet, there's not necessarily, it could be the best thing ever. And if you don't mind talking about autism as well, I really believe that because we're in the theta state of the vibration of the brain, there is, and I've done this in the school with the kids, that I didn't need to go around and check the autistic kids' work, because we had this telepathy form of communication that they were just fine. And I knew that their work was okay, and they knew that I was happy with that, without any kind of verbal instruction. So if you do have mute autistic kids, there's so much communication going on, and it's a bit like when you blow a dog whistle. You can't hear that, but the dogs can. So we're on a completely different level when the autism is there. If you don't mind, I just want to bring on like the more worse effects of some ADHD medications. I think it's really good to have a small list of the ADHD medications when you go into your doctor, and maybe laminate it or something, because then you can go through a list, not to ask for a certain medication, because you're not a doctor. That's why we have doctors. But when my son said to me, he got a new medication, he said to me, "Dad, I don't want to live anymore." I took the medication away, put it in the car, went back to the doctor the next day and said, "My son said he don't want to live anymore, and that's it. Let's go back to the medication that we used before." So there are sometimes, that's a red flag, right? So we've got to be aware of the quietness, and if they are quiet, that's okay. It's just that if they indicate that something's wrong, that's when you need to be more aware.
Very good advice. We went through a similar situation with my son where we did make adjustments in medication. He wasn't taking the medication for ADHD, but it's similar medication categories. And what we found is now that he's in his early 20s, he's able to go back to those meds because his brain has gone through whatever phase he was in at the time. When he was 15, he couldn't handle it. Now it's the perfect medicine for him. And for years we had it on his file with the doctor in red, "Do not give," because we didn't want them to even experiment with that category again. Things may change. It may be something that it may be a growth spurt that they're in that's not the right fit at the time. But these are all questions you have to bring up with your doctor to know what the best situation is.
Yeah, exactly.
Simon, I want to make sure we have time to do both your side of the podcast and this side. So listeners, stay with us, because this is going to be a continuing conversation. But before we finish this half of it, this season I've been asking my guests questions about what I'm calling a day in the life. And it's kind of a way for us to connect with you differently without it being an official interview type question. It's still going to be a question, so I guess it's the same thing. But I was trying to think like what I wanted to ask you, because as an adult, you've changed from what your previous life was to what your life is today, having the diagnosis confirmed, but also having had time now to kind of get adjusted to life with AuDHD. So for you, what does a typical day look like? Are there any routines or strategies or sensory considerations that you apply during the day to help you? You had mentioned journaling, but what are some other things you're doing?
I start my day. So my day revolves around meditation. So I get up at 4 o'clock, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and I meditate for an hour, which shifts the melatonin phase to the serotonin phase within the brain. You know, when we feel groggy, that's because the serotonin phase hasn't caught up yet, right? We don't reach for the coffee. We shouldn't do that or check emails. But it doesn't matter who we are. We've got to wait for that switch. It's not like melatonin goes away. It's still there. But that's really key to me. And then at the end of the day, the melatonin goes back and says good night, and the serotonin says good night, and then the melatonin takes over so that we can sleep well. And yeah, whatever day's happening, really, I plan that at the start and the beginning of the day.
So during your meditating time, you're kind of going through your day of what's coming up, what your plans are?
No, I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting like in the middle of like completely away from body and mind in a way, just because I know that the brain needs to basically warm up or cool down at the end of the day.
Okay. All right. I can see that. Skills that I'm still learning for myself. So another question would be, you're really immersed with the podcast and in your community through the podcast. But aside from the podcast itself, what are some ways that you're engaging or finding support within the ADHD or autism community in your daily life?
I actually have found all the rehabilitation and everything and information I've known to get that special guest on the podcast. You know, if I believe that they know more or they've got different experiences, I basically speak to them, and it opens up my awareness. It gives me more clarity. And in doing so, I'll share it with my audience so everyone wins at the same time.
All right. So speaking of the podcast, tell us how to connect with the podcast and any contact information you have.
Yep. The podcast is the AuDHD Me and Mo, the podcast, on Spotify and all other providers. And you can really find me on LinkedIn under Simon Arnold. And that's about it at the moment. I do have a website, but obviously I need to, or you can write to me on Spotify for creators in the comments section. And then I know where everyone reaches out to me.
Listeners, I'm going to challenge you to go and to check out the other half of this interview. But while you're there, I want you to go on Apple, if you're listening on Apple, and leave a review for him, whatever country you're in, so that he can start building his audience there and his credibility with that. And if you are watching this on YouTube, leave us a comment below with your biggest question that you want to ask, and we can, between the two of us, we will get back to you with that. So Simon, thanks for this half of the interview. I'm looking forward to seeing what questions you might have now on the other half.
Thanks, Tonya.
Now it's time for you to go to Simon's podcast, AuDHD Me and Mo the Podcast, to hear the rest of our conversation. I'll post the link below for you. Hearing different perspectives enriches our understanding and empowers us on this parenting journey. If you haven't done so, subscribe to Water Prairie and leave a review on Apple Podcasts to help us reach more parents of children with disabilities. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.